All right, next email comes from Suicide King. Suicide King himself. He spells with a Z.
Suicide King?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He says, with the PS4.5 all but confirmed at this point, I feel that Microsoft has more to gain than Sony. It is well known Xbox One is underpowered compared to the PS4. I remember Sam Claiborne mentioning that when he is playing Xbox, in the back of his mind, he's always wondering how much better the game would look on Sony's console. My thought is that if both companies release an upgraded version of their current consoles, Microsoft can even the playing field or even possibly make their version slightly better. This in turn would allow Sony to lose their advantage in this area of the console war. Would love to hear your thoughts.
I'm scared to death of an arms race. This isn't an add-on pack we're talking about, at least not from what I understand. We're talking about a whole new piece of hardware that yes, it's going to have some backward compatibility, it sounds like. It'll run, quote-unquote, the same titles, but you know you're getting a lower fidelity experience of some kind. And I am worried about a high-cost arms race. I don't want to buy a new console every 3 years. I have PCs for that, and I enjoy them for that. But the console space has existed for almost 40 years in a place where once you bought what you bought, you had an idea that you'd made a major investment that was going to be good for you for probably a 5 to 7 year period. Now,
Yeah.
I hope I don't sound too much like an old man.
No.
But I'm already tired of buying a new phone every 2 years. The last thing I want to do is do that with another piece of expensive home electronics just because.
See, I think if you can subsidize the cost, then it becomes a non-issue. Like, no joke, I'm glad you brought up the phone thing, because when I first started reading the rumors about PS4.5, I was reading it on my iPhone, and I got a text from AT&T being like, you are eligible for a new upgrade. And I was actually going to complain about, I was like in the middle of typing something somewhere where I was just like, this is dumb, they should never do this. And it was just like, oh, cool, new phone. Oh, awesome,
Yeah.
I want to get one of those. Yeah. So if they made some sort of thing where you could trade in, I know when I bought my last iPhone, I traded in my old phone on the spot. And at the Apple store, they paid me for it and took that money and put it directly towards my new purchase. And it was just like, oh, wow, awesome. You just knocked like $150 off of this thing. So if that's something they can do, I'm into it. What worries me is then when do I do that again? Like if this is something that happens once a generation, that now becomes I buy a PS4 and then PS4.5 and then I buy in 3 years a PS5 and a PS5.5. I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah, the PS4 SE.
Yeah, but if it's like, dude, if it gets to that kind of that thing where it's just like every year is not just a cosmetic difference, but it's also like, oh, it's quieter or it's faster.
Comes in rose gold.
Yeah.
Rose gold.
And that's what I'm worried about. I don't want to deal with that kind of escalation. I
3D
hope
touch.
I hope it's like an old man, maybe, but it's a little frustrating. This is a space where I've had a pretty good idea what the market was going to offer me for a long time. I don't see a need for this to change. I understand.
You don't sound like an old man because a huge part of the video game market is younger teenagers that don't have lots of money to burn.
Totally. Yeah, it's that weird balance where, like, on one hand, I'm like, oh man, it'd be kind of cool if. I mean, the whole 4K thing doesn't really apply to any of us. None of us have 4K TVs, I don't think. And 4K streaming is not like the American bandwidth infrastructure is not going to be able to handle it for quite a while. So that part doesn't really excite me. But the idea of being like, oh man, what if the load times are better? And what if they looked a little bit better? Or the particle effects. Like, it would be the equivalent of if you were gaming on a PC going from like high to ultra settings. We're like, you're not losing anything content-wise.
Right.
It's not like the game on high doesn't look good. It's just on ultra, you get a little bit more. But on the other hand, I totally feel the same way. I'm like, well, I bought these two things at launch, and I don't want to get boned by people who waited 3 or 4 years.
Well, the PC thing's a really good comparison, though, because I mean, we are talking about how people do have limited income, but that doesn't seem to affect people who are in the high-end PC market, and they're gamers, and they want to buy. They can buy a game today and run it as best as possible, or they can up their graphics card and run it better. And that's an option you have. I think when you get to a point where it's like, I look at stuff like the new Nintendo 3DS, right? And when we first heard about that, I was terrified that it was going to split the market because all of these games would end up only being on the new Nintendo 3DS, and the millions of people that owned a regular 3DS couldn't play it. Turns out like 2 games ended up there.
And now Super Nintendo games.
And Super Nintendo, like the actual benefits of having that console ended up mostly being 25-year-old games. Which is very weird to me. So I think if the option's there, it's okay. If it starts getting to a point where you feel like you have to upgrade because you're missing out, then there's a problem. It's also this is a big problem for the console wars, Because if I'm supposed to argue as a PlayStation guy against Xbox, and now I have to fight my own PlayStation people about which PlayStation's better, it's tearing us. You're tearing this family apart.
Which is why console wars are dumb. One of the main reasons.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
you are the most anti-console war person I know.
Yeah, no, I'm completely agnostic when it comes to video game platforms for the most part.
It's also, I can't imagine someone, if they say someone just owns a PS4, and then all of a sudden a PS4.5 comes out, them being like, I'm going to spend $400 on the PS4.5. I'd be like, well, what if you spent that on an Xbox so you could play stuff like Sunset Overdrive and Halo and Gears, or spend that on an NX so you could play Wibby's Wobby World or whatever.
Yeah, Wibby's Wobby World.
And they can talk all
Launch firmed.
they can talk all they want about the power of the consoles and what they're capable of, but the fact is that people get better and better and better at creating software for platforms as time goes on. When you go back and look at GTA 5 at the end of the last gen, smoke ought to have been coming out of the side of your 360. Yeah. But that was because people developed a high expertise of craftsmanship. I don't quite buy that 3 years in, we're far enough in that we've reached that apex yet. I feel like this does not serve the majority of consumers. It squeezes them. And that's my gut check on this.
I'm totally with you on that. And I don't feel like it's an either-or scenario, but especially coming from Sony, hey, maybe prioritize your first-party studios to make really awesome software right now, which I know is happening, but this generation has not been fantastic for first-party stuff. The Order 1886 is one of the best-looking games on consoles, period. It's not a great game, but at no point during that was I like, man, this needs better graphics.
Yeah, that wasn't the problem.
That wasn't the problem.
Yeah.
Graphics haven't really been the problem this generation. I haven't really looked at anything and been like, that's an issue. I'm more concerned with get better quality games. Get more people working on interesting software, because that's first and foremost. I think that you're going to sell PS4.5s to a bunch of people who already have a PS4. I don't know how many people who are on the fence on getting a PlayStation console are going to jump in with the 4.5. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me, I think you're going to sell the people who are already there, the diehard Sony people, and then, from there, what do? You keep splitting up that market. So.
And I'm really sort of confused if it's just going to phase out the PS4. If it will be introduced at the same price, and then a PS4 will drop in price and then evenally phase out, and 3 years from now the 4.5 will be
look at iPhones, right? When a new game comes to iOS and you're like, I really want to play this. I saw a bunch of people playing Miitomo, obviously, and that game is a surprisingly giant resource hog.
Yeah.
It eats
destroys
up
your
battery.
battery.
It's very interesting because it's mostly just an avatar of a guy walking around a one-bedroom apartment. Yeah. I don't know why I'm so into it, because that's all I do in real life too. But people on iPhone 4s are having trouble with this game. But it's you're on an iPhone 4. You're phased out at this point. You're 2 phones behind or 3 phones behind. No, they're not interested in you anymore. So I think if we get to a point where it's Horizon 2 only runs on the PS4.8 or whatever the hell it is by then, that's kind of a problem for anybody that bought a console expecting it to last 7 years, which historically Sony consoles do, or consoles in general do.
Yeah, I agree, and it's a little frustrating and it's a little painful even to watch happen. They're going to tell you that these things are not going to be phased out. No one is going to say, of course, they'll be good forever. Nobody ever says that. When the DS came out, no, it's the third pillar. Not abandoning the Game Boy. Yeah. We're just adding this. The Game Boy was dead 2 years later.
Yeah.
That's how it works. If you buy into this, there's a very good chance that gradually that technology is going to get left behind. They will take as much money as we are willing to give them. And frankly, I kind of feel like we're being pulled along by the nose a little bit on this.
That being said, if you could upgrade your console and just give it to somebody, and they'll give you the new one for $100 or something like that, would you take that deal?
I'd think about it.
Okay.
I don't know if I do it or not. Because I feel like I'm vilifying, I do like, there have been add-on packs. I've bought them before, and I'm a PC guy, so I know how the upgrade cycle thing works. But, again, Microsoft's already given me one world where I can buy new hardware every 3 years. It's called a Windows computing environment, and they help create the hardware-software loop that makes that necessary. I don't want to see that invade the rest of my gaming.
Did you buy the RAM pack on N64?
No, probably came with Donkey Kong.
I mean, you had to play Perfect Dark, right?
Actually, I don't think I ever bought my own RAM pack.
Did you steal one?
Huh? No. But I was living in a dorm at the time, so the guy next door had the Perfect Dark with the RAM pack, so we just went over there.
Got it. Yeah, no, I know a lot of people who are like, I cut cable, and I'm like, oh, how's it going? They're like, really good. I use my parents' Comcast lobby. I'm like, doesn't count.
Yeah. But I'm trying to think on any N64 I ever owned. I don't think I ever actually purchased a RAM pack from it.
Like 3 games.
Yeah, interesting.